And that has then resulted in the accumulation, in the divergence in the competitiveness, in the divergence of the real exchange rates, and the accumulation of the deficit in the south and the surplus in the north. So the countries like Portugal or Greece have accumulated over an 11-year period 100% of the GDP in the current account deficit. So obviously something, if you take a longer view, this is obviously unsustainable, because you have 10 years of the constant divergence and accumulation of the deficit. Now there was this, again, false perception, and many economists argued that very forcefully, that the current account deficit doesn't matter within the monetary union because you have the same currency and there's no exchange rate risk. And they were pointing to the US and say, well, do current account deficits matter in the US between the currencies? No, because it's monetary union. So we can be actually relaxed about the current account deficits, which of course proved to be another false perception. Now, interesting thing is, like, if you look at the who financed these deficits, so this is the share of outstanding debt securities at the beginning of the crisis held outside of the euro area, and it shows that it was basically almost all financed by the North Europe. So the deficit of the South was financed by the North. There were very few bondholders outside of the euro area that were financing the deficits of the southern countries. They were much more willing to buy the Finnish or German or Dutch debt than to buy Greece or Portugal or Spain, which tells you that that tells you that probably within the Europe this view that there is no risk for the countries within the Eurozone, that this is a safe haven for them, was more widely held than from the investors outside of the Eurozone. So the Landesbanken were chasing the yield in Greek bonds, German, while the investors from the US or from Singapore were rather buying the Finnish bonds, because they say, well, the spread is so small, like there's a 30 basis point difference in the spread, and the credit risk is still there. So this misconception about the disappearance of the credit risk because the countries are within the Eurozone was higher, I would say, in Europe than elsewhere. Although, of course, you can also say it is a monetary union, so you have a home bias. It's much more natural to see the European banks funding the other European nations than to see the foreigners doing the same. Now, the question, once the crisis started, was how come that for so long the markets were so wrong? How they didn't see things coming? Now, if you look at the period before the crisis started, 2003 to 2007, 5 years, then you can see that the nominal growth rates of these countries were high.
That's the average, right?
Yeah, that's the average. Yeah. Now 7.3 in Greece, or 7.6 in Ireland, or 7.6 in Spain. So the guys there in the banks or asset managers were probably looking at that and saying, well, look, their debt is increasing, but with these phenomenal growth rates, it's fine. They can still do it. But then the crisis started. Of course, it came from US, not originally from Europe, and suddenly the situation immediately changed, and so you have a huge difference in the growth rates between the two periods. And once it started, everybody looked at these countries and said, oh, they're in a deep trouble, because suddenly their growth rates have completely disappeared, and they will not be able to service their debt. And they started to look at the other data. So they look at the external adjustment needs for the foreign debt, and they see that in a country like Greece or Portugal, they have to adjust the current account by 10 percentage points of the GDP, only to stop the increase in the foreign debt, which, as we know, is much easier to do with the current account than with the fiscal accounts, because the crisis usually causes the very rapid adjustment in the current account deficits because of the collapse in the import demand. Now the gross foreign debt was like 6 times the exports or 4 times the tax revenue. So it all doesn't look very well once the growth is gone, and it was gone from one year to another. So immediately they lost completely the countries like Greece or Portugal. They lost the confidence of the markets. And this is like just Argentina. But this is Argentina is a different thing. I'm not going to say here. Mario can say what happened in '99 in Argentina. Net foreign debt still relatively high in terms of the exports or tax revenues. But the real problem really was how these countries will stop the increase in the public debt. So this is a snowball effect, which means like higher the debt you have, more difficult it is to have an adjustment, particularly when the GDP is coming down. And on the right-hand side, actually, you see the primary balance adjustment required to offset the snowball effect, which means only what you need to do in 1 year, only to stabilize public debt to GDP ratio. So the fiscal adjustment in terms of the GDP in 1 year, just to stop the increase in the public debt, not to put it on a declining path. And you see that Ireland is 7.4 percentage points of the GDP, Greece 10 percentage points of the GDP. If you look at that, you know they cannot do it. Which country will do 10 percentage points of the GDP fiscal adjustment in 1 year? So whatever mathematics you did at that point, and we were doing it in different ways, the public debt of the Greece simply continues to increase. And it was clear that some kind of debt restructuring will be needed immediately then, because there is no capacity for a country to undergo such a fiscal adjustment.